Well, I suppose to look at me, you think I've always been the gentle creature which stands before you, but that is not the case. I was a rather rambunctious child to the point my parents found it difficult to live with me. Well, not just me, but my big brother too. How many of you got a big brother? Okay. How many got a big brother 4 years older than you? Well, then you'll know that you can never win an argument. I mean, I was pretty good on the words, but when it came to blows, I always came up short. My big brother did beat me, but only when I deserved it, and nobody else ever did because they knew who my big brother was, and so for that I'm grateful. But I imagine it was the both of us together that gave our parents pause. Oh, they didn't mind the winter so much. You see, we were either in school or asleep most of the day, but as the long summer days approached, they would get a bit antsy. And when I say long, I mean long. You see, we lived in Anchorage, Alaska, smack dab in the land of the midnight sun. In Anchorage, Alaska, it just does not get dark for any appreciable amount of time in the summer. So their situation was solved by shipping us off to my grandparents' place in Montana. And when I say ship, I mean serious. We'd get on the train at Anchorage, Alaska, and from Anchorage, Alaska to Whittier, Alaska, we would be on the train. And then from Whittier, Alaska to Seattle, Washington, we were on a ship. And then from Seattle, Washington to Brigham City, Utah, we'd be on the train. And there my uncle, Ephraim Madsen Johnson, would meet us at the railroad station in his Buick, and we'd be off to Montana. My granddad had leased a great big ranch right smack dab in the middle of Montana. And in fact, my brother and I were the only white kids within 25 miles. It's not that the Indians wouldn't play with us. They particularly liked to play cowboys and Indians. In fact, their favorite variation was known as Custer's Last Stand. You know, I was 14 before I figured out that getting beat up twice a day wasn't part of everyone's summer adventure. But anyway, I tell you, this beautiful ranch out there in the middle of the Montana wilderness, and my granddad and granny and I and my brother together. You know, as a kid, you look at your granddad and you assume he's perfect, and I still revere him as a great man. Is only fair for the patriarch of my family, but I can see now that he had his flaws. For example, he used to talk politics at the dinner table. Now, I'm sure none of you would do that, but anyway, I remember one night particularly he mentioned that the mayor ought to be tarred and feathered. Now, the only town was 25 miles away, but we knew everybody in it, and I knew the mayor. He was an interesting fellow, weighed well over 350 pounds, and the image of that man completely covered with feathers kind of stuck right here in my mind. It was a dream I could not get rid of, but I knew he would not approve, and there seemed to be no way to get a hold of him. However, that does not stop a young person with time and ingenuity from getting what he wants. Now, I'm telling you this so that you will know if you don't keep your young people busy, they're going to find out a way to occupy their time. And I figured out a way to do it. Because you see, my granddad had on that ranch a hog that looked considerable like the mayor, and I figured he would do in a pinch. Of course, while I knew my granddad was in on it for the mayor, I knew he would be protective of his hog. But all I had to do was find a period of time when granddad was off the ranch, and then I knew the hog would be in my hands. Now, this was not difficult because I was an observant child. And I observed a special cause and effect relationship. You see, my granny belonged to the Sweet Adelines. How many heard of the Sweet Adelines? That's right, it's a singing group. And they would rotate from one ranch to another, one day each week, and do some singing and a considerable amount of gossip, and eat great little dainties which they would prepare for each other, which they did not usually serve to their families. But I had noticed, as I said, this cause and effect relationship. Whenever the Sweet Adelines came to our ranch, Granddad always had work to do out on the North 40. So all I had to do was find the day circled in red on the calendar and marked Sweet Adelines, and I knew the hog would be in my hands. So that morning I I headed out to the barn with my big brother. Now, there were some obstacles we had to overcome. First of all, we didn't have any tar, but we did have a big Folgers coffee can, complete with the Arab, a big Folgers coffee can full of pine pitch glue. Now, when pine pitch glue is warm, it's just got the consistency of honey. When it's cold, it's just like amber, which is what it is. But we took it in there and started warming it on the stove. And then we had to get some feathers. Now, I didn't have any feathers, but I did know my granny collected goose down, for stuffing pillows and comforters. And so only difference between a down and a feather is a feather has a stick down the middle and a down does not. So I figured the down would do in a pinch. So I climbed up into the loft and I brought down 2 or 3 big bags of it, hauled it out to the pigsty, and my brother brought down the pitch. Now we only had to procure the hogs' cooperation, which is easy to do if you understand how hogs think, which I did. I knew hogs, so I knew what they like. Hogs like corn. Now my granny had some corn. It's called Indian corn. Have you ever seen it? It's purple and red and gold and silver, shot through with ripples and lines of color and contrast. Yeah, she had a big bunch of that she used to hang up at the front door every Thanksgiving and leave it there through New Year's. But this was July, so I knew she would not be needing it. So I gave it to my brother and told him to stand in front of the hog. This would keep the hog's attention and lead the hind end, which was the part that looked most like the mare, to my attention. So I ran around there and I took that pine pitch and I slathered it all over that hog's hind end. You talk about your thing of beauty. You talk about your glazed hams, where the sunlight struck those bristles, they glinted like rhinestones. But I wasn't done. I took that goose down and I plastered it all over that hog's hind end. Oh my God, thing of beauty. How many of you remember when Hostess used to do those little marshmallow mound cupcakes with the grated coconut? A pink one and a white one. When you get rid of that pink one, you take 2 white ones and you squeeze them together just a bit and you have a vision of what I was looking at. Except I noticed that there was a little bald spot on the right hand side that's running with the hog about the size of my hand. Of course, my hands were smaller in those days, but I've always been a perfectionist. So I decided I needed to touch up. So leaving my brother with the corn, I headed over to the pitch can. But it had gone cold in the interim. The only pitch remaining was either congealed around the sides or gluing the brush to the bottom. Well, that wouldn't do. So I ran back to the barn and I put the pitch can on the stove. I threw in some wood. I pumped the bellows several times just to get it a roar. And you might imagine the sound of that pitch as it started to pop and sizzle and run down the side of that can and come to a boil in the bottom. That can was so hot I had to take pliers off the shelf to carry it out to the pigsty. I got out there and I went around behind that pig and I loaded that brush with that boiling pitch and I planted it right there on that hog's hind end. I want you to know he forgot all about the corn. He forgot about my brother. He forgot about the pigsty. He went across the top of all 3, right up the front lawn and into the parlor with the sweet Adelines. Yeah, the only creature on that ranch with a sore hind end and that hog was me, with the possible exception of my brother.